feel like my hair currently is growing like triangularly, like I'm, what are the dogs that have like real floppy ears up front, like not Shelties, but like a dog that's got just like curly hair up in front, and you're like, oh, look at those big floppy ears. And like when my hair gets long, I just turn into a big floppy dog, and I don't know what to do. I'm desperate for someone who can deal with my very new, very delicate, very fine hair.
Well, my hairstylist messaged me because I had like posted some picture on Instagram with a filter, of course. And she messaged me on Instagram. She's like, you didn't color your hair, did you? And I was like, no. She's like, good, because with your fine, delicate hair, you cannot use like store-bought, color or anything like that. And I was like, I know. I'm like, I'm just going to be weirdly gray and kind of icky. And
I think there is
like
a
old powder I like put on.
Oh yeah.
Like my temples right here now. My mom's like, let me see your gray hair. I've never seen a gray. And I'm like, no.
You're like, no, the facade must remain, mama. I have a girlfriend who has very short hair anyway, but she went just full. I've got two girlfriends who just totally buzzed, and they were like, no, quarantine do. And one of them had her husband do it, and the other girl did it herself. And I just like, yes, ladies, I love it. This is awesome.
Matt, my husband, actually came to me last night and was like, so you might have to cut my hair, like do the bzzz. And I was like, he was like, I promise whatever happens, I will not get mad. I was like, okay.
Cutting men's hair, I would be terrified. Like I've cut my own bangs before. I've like cut inches off my hair. Like I'll get fixated and I'll like do the, wet the hair down and do it parted and like ponytails, and then I can use little cuticle scissors and you just cut upwards. And
you've got a whole methodology to this thing.
Oh yeah. I've like totally fully cut my bangs from, like hair to here to like full fringe bangs.
Wow.
And I'll even go to my hairdresser afterwards and he's like, not so bad. And I'm like, thanks.
That's impressive.
As long as you don't cut bangs after having had a cocktail or a glass of wine. That's the only thing where you're like, I'm drunk and cutting bangs. I've seen that happen before. You just don't do it.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds like a terrible combo.
Cocktails and cutting do not.
Concentrate on your bangs, and you're like, oh.
Just starts blurring. Yeah. TK, how are you so warm that you have sleeveless on? I'm currently wearing socks and leg warmers and tights and a long sleeve shirt with a tank top underneath. Like I'm all bundled and I'm a little chilly.
I'm always usually cold, but I think the light that I have actually radiates some heat, so it kind of keeps me warm in here. Also, this room is such a weird room. I may have mentioned this before, that we had some rain damage just as Safer at Home was starting, so our whole bedroom is cleared out, and we have like, you can't see it, but there's a mattress up on the wall over there. Like it's kind of crazy. So,
man, what a time! What a time!
What a time!
You're practicing like wrestling moves into it. The first thing that came to my mind, I'm like, ooh, that would be fun. Bouncing off the mattress off the wall.
Oh, there's a great scene in it's Band-Aid, she's so wonderful and I can't think of her name. She's on Life in Pieces on CBS. Anyway, she wrote a movie and directed it, had an all-female crew. It's called Band-Aid. It was at Sundance. Oh my, I'm so embarrassed.
Is it a music movie?
Yes, there is music in it. She and her husband are in a funk after a tragedy in their life, and they, as their marriage is falling apart, they decide to start a band with their neighbor Fred Armisen to sort of deal with their emotional trauma. It's fantastic. Anyway, but there's a scene in that with a mattress where she literally just has it out with a mattress, and it is incredibly cathartic, and it's a great movie. And I am going to find your name out because I'm so sorry. You're an amazing hero to me, and I can't think of your name. So sorry.
You're
That's
allowed,
what research is for.
Yeah.
We'll post a link to it in the comments so people can find it once we get off.
I'm totally watching it now.
Figure out who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially a music movie.
Yeah. Exactly. So hey, it's Earth Month right now, at least while we're recording. And I was doing some research for this science docuseries that I am creating. And I was wanting to know, like, who are the scientists that have saved the most lives, since obviously right now we're talking about saving lives, and things like vaccines obviously save lives. And it was, making me think about the other sort of big existential threat that we all face right now, of course, is climate change. And I was like, well, what's really the history of climate change? As someone who's as huge of a green living advocate as I am, I don't know any of that. So I ended up stumbling onto an article in Wired magazine that I would love to share with you all.
Should we have introduced ourselves?
Oh, that's right. We should have.
Probably. This is episode 5, so hopefully by now you all know that we are the Sirens, the Screen Sirens for Science. I'm Tamara Krinsky.
Hello, everybody. I am Gia Mora.
And hi, I'm Taryn O'Neill.
And we get together to chill and hang out, and we each bring something that has caught our attention in the area of STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're all a little focused on climate this time around. So, Gia,
it's so cool how it all just kind of connected in. I mean, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day is this April 22nd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, is it 22nd or? Yeah, it's 22nd.
22nd, right? Yeah. Oh, it took the one image out. Oh, boo. I was going to show you the cover. I'll pull it up in a second. But this is an excerpt from a book by Charles C. Mann called The Wizard and the Prophet, published by Penguin House Random. Anyway, it was excerpted in Wired, and that's how I stumbled onto it. And the headline kind of says it all. Meet the amateur scientist who discovered climate change. This is a long read. What's cool about it, in this reader view extender that I got, it actually gives you the reading time, which is quite, I don't know if that's
quite long.
Yeah, it's quite long. And I don't know if that's a feature of Wired or if that's a feature of this, but anyway, pretty cool. So I won't keep this up super long, but I'd like to introduce you to this guy, Guy Callender. He was the son of Britain's leading steam engineer. He was born right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in 1898, and in the 30s he started doing research on the atmosphere and measuring different levels of things in our atmosphere in general. And he came to the conclusion that we were putting too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that it could cause global temperature changes. I'm going to stop sharing because there's really nothing else here to share. So anyway, in 1938, he presented all of his findings to the Royal Meteorological Society, I think, and presented it to these 6 people, and all previous sort of calls for awareness about the Industrial Revolution affecting the climate were really dismissed. And again, the 6 people who he talked to then also dismissed his claim. He died in 1964, and so we had another 30 years of that research where he kept saying this, and he was talking about the relationship between nitrogen and oxygen and water vapor in our atmosphere. And the relationship between those 3 different things is what allows the permeation of infrared light into our atmosphere. And depending on how it escapes or is trapped, it changes the different climate things. And that could be more moisture or less moisture, but it's really, really unpredictable. So when they come up with these big shifts in, like, oh, the climate differential for temperature change could be 1 degree Celsius, or it could be as great as 8 degrees Celsius. And there's a tolerable level somewhere in there, or maybe an intolerable level, but the modeling is so complex that they just can't really get a good answer for it. And it's the same problem that he was having back in the 30s. So anyway, he dies in the 60s, there's nothing else that comes of that. Not until 1988 does the idea of climate change kind of enter our vernacular again, and that's with the publication of Bill McKibben's book. But right when Callender died, this isn't in the article, but that's right around the same time that Rachel Carson also published Silent Spring. So there was a coalescing of that happening at that time. But again, another 20 years after that, in the late 80s, is when we finally started talking about it. Anyway, so then this article goes on to describe what are ways that we might sort of mitigate these changes. And one of the things that we can do is geoengineer, which is literally changing the climate to accommodate our needs. And if you've ever read Sarah Ruhl's book about Hawaii, can't remember the title of it. I'll find it though. But anyway, sugarcane, for example, is not a native crop to Hawaii at all. They completely terraformed the land in order to grow, because this is all volcanic rock. It wasn't green, lush, everything it needs to have grown that. So we have done this in a number of different ways, and you can even do it in the climate. There's something called crop seeding, I think it's called. Anyway, you go up and you, with a plane, throw like dry ice in the air, and you can kind of, yeah. And so they were saying, well, could you do this on a, a global level? Could you basically pollute to mitigate the pollution? And the problem is it's really in only microclimate areas, and there are still local problems with winners and losers in that battle, and you can't do it globally. And what if the global needs are in opposition? Like some people need more rain and some people don't. So they're in these climate conflicts and the challenges of all of that. And so anyway, it's an incredible read. I feel like I knew none of this, and I'm ashamed that I knew none of this, considering how important this is. And it's just so terrifying. That's literally been 100 years of people almost raising the alarm, and we have not heeded it at all. So sorry to be a real bummer, but let's be really excited about the fact that we just learned this awesome piece of science history, and we just met Guy Callender, and he's the gentleman that we can thank for saying, hey guys, maybe we ought to look at that CO2 in our air, maybe.
Well, this is a perfect story for something we like to call glossed over, which are stories from history about science, tech, engineering, and math that we may not have heard of. Very often, not in this case, very often they tend to be women who were never written about, or people of color. And in this case, you got an original pioneer there. So I did not know about him.
What are your ladies' thoughts on geoengineering? Because I of course think to movies and the director of Parasite, where his first sort of transition into the U.S. market was with Snowpiercer, the feature that Chris Evans was the lead on, like 6-7 years ago, and that story is based on geoengineering gone wrong, and it throws the world into this new ice age.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny you should say that, because that's one of the things that Callender actually was trying to avoid. He thought that global warming was a good thing because he was worried that we were going to tip over into this ice age again. So that, he didn't even understand that it was the inverse, and that's the difficulty of the climate modeling. Because you don't know which extreme it is.
It's really complex. I mean, in one of my absolute favorite sci-fi book series, it's by Kim Stanley Robinson, and it's a series on Mars. So you've got Green Mars, Red Mars, Blue Mars, Red Mars, Green Mars. Anyway, 3 different Mars books that are all, it's a hard science sci-fi look at what would happen when we finally do go to Mars. And one of the central conflicts throughout the series are the folks who want to adapt Mars for us versus the folks who want to say, no, humans actually adapt to Mars. And there they call it terraforming. That's the term they use for geoengineering. And I loved that book, and it directly relates back to this.
Yeah.
Cool.
Super interesting.
Whose article connects in? I mean, I know mine does, but I don't want to jump on if yours does too, TK. I actually don't, I didn't look at the document and see what you were about to speak to.
Ooh, all right. Well then, yeah, I mean, mine actually connects, in a very direct way, because mine deals with chemistry and material science, actually. So mine is, I will bring up my screen. Let's see, where are we here? Okay, so my piece, can y'all see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my piece is from Ars Technica. It's by John Timmer, and it is about a newly engineered enzyme that can break down plastic.
Oh, did you happen to see this in the Science and Entertainment Exchange? Is that where it was? Or I saw this headline too. Oh, okay. Oh, this is so good. I'm so glad you did this. Yay.
Yeah, so here's some good news. Something to be positive about. So no, I actually saw it here, and actually there's also an article in there's several of them floating around, and there's one in the Guardian.
That's
the
where
Guardian as well. So it's kind of all over the place right now because it's new news, but it's all based on a piece that was published in the journal Nature. So you have several different choices of how to look at it, and this is focusing specifically on PET, or let's see if I can get this right, polyethylene terephthalate, which we commonly know, as you can see from the picture there, most commonly for water bottles, which we all know are a huge, huge problem. Right, so the thing is, water bottles can be recycled, and The way that they break down, though, is that they are most commonly used to be formed into clothing and carpet and things like that. But they can't actually break down and recycle a water bottle so that it can then be formed into a new water bottle again, because it breaks down so completely that it has to be used for something else. And part of the problem with that is, okay, fine, you recycle your water bottle. But then what happens is you have to go through that whole entire process again to make new water bottles. And it uses a ton of energy, it uses a ton of heat, and that's not good for the environment either. So if you want a little primer though on PET, there are two videos that I found. One is from TED Ed, what really happens to the plastic that you throw away. And then there's also what is PET. Now this is from Container and Packaging. So, just in critical thinking, it's always good to be aware of what the source is that is giving you your information. The what is PET is really a little bit more of the basics of what it is and has a little bit more of a positive spin on it and how we use it because it's from Containers and Packaging. TED Ed is a little bit more about recycling. So I just wanted to bring those up, and of course we will put that into the links. So anyway, the thing that they've been able to do is break it down to use it for things like polyester clothing. But we want to get to a point where we could break down this polymer, which is a chemical compound that has molecules that are bonded together in long chains, where it's only broken down to the point where they can actually reuse them to make these plastic bottles again. And that way you would actually have somewhat of a solution for this problem of having to make everything from scratch again, which comes from oil, which we're trying to cut down on. So the exciting news here is that they originally found this enzyme in a compost pile, and then they engineered it and were able to get it to the point where it was actually able to break down 90% of the PET in under 10 hours, which is amazing. It's a little bit pricier. It's 4% more to create new bottles than it would be from, original stocks that they use, original feedstocks from the oil. But 4% isn't a lot when you consider the huge increase in sustainability. So they're just starting with this. It's definitely not ready yet. One of the companies that's involved said they would love to get it up and running by like 2024, 2025. So we're still a ways away, but this is how and where solutions start. So I was really, really excited to read about this. You can take a look at the articles and they'll go into the full breakdown on the chemistry. I would say the Guardian article is probably a little more consumer friendly. The Ars Technica actually gets into the breakdown of the chemistry if that's something that you're interested in. So a little bit of good news for today.
Spanky is also really happy about that good news. So I'm so sorry
Spanky would be Gia's cat. Spanky was also my nickname when I was a dancing, singing waitress at a 1950s restaurant in high school.
Oh, that's darling. Well, he was named.
I love getting a little factoid on TK. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was Spanky. My close friends were Roxy and Swivel Hips. And
oh my goodness. And for those of you who don't know that TK is actually like teacup size. She's just so beautiful and perfect and small. And I love it so much. So I can imagine like you with just a little bit of a bouffant. I would have gone head over heels for you. I love it so much. That's awesome.
All right, I'm not gonna lie. I've been doing some safer at home cleaning out. I am not a Marie Kondo person. I keep stuff, and I found my uniform in one of the boxes that I had.
Oh, we need a photo.
Like that.
I think
it's like
you need
that.
to wear one episode. We need to do a retro vibe episode or something.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I like that. All
Gia
right,
can
Tio.
sing, and I have no idea what I'll do.
Tio, what did you find this time? What'd you find?
It's more of a debate topic because I like those kind of thought pieces, and it's in line with our climate issues. I'll call this climate episode. It's from the Atlantic again.
So good.
So I'm really interested in where the innovation to combat climate change is going to come from, because I don't really believe that people are going to be able to change their behaviors to the extent that the climate needs us to mediate our carbon export or output. So we need sort of these big investments in innovation. And in the past, it's always been the government that's done it. When we wanted to go to the moon, for the moonshot, JFK, he mobilized the country and, billions and billions of dollars to get us there. And of course, it was in competition with the Russians. And now to combat climate, it shouldn't be in competition. It should be in collaboration with the world. But we have Jeff Bezos, who's the Amazon founder and the richest man in the world, who just announced earlier last month the creation of the Bezos Earth Fund. And this is a $10 billion fund that will be basically seed financing all these different climate initiatives. And this article is by Franklin Foer, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I apologize, Franklin, but we will find you online. And he goes into sort of the existential crisis that Bezos's investment shows about our country, that we have one man who has enough money to unblemished dedicate $10 billion to this fund. And so, there's so many issues on circulating around Amazon's taxation, about the amount of carbon footprint that Amazon's manufacturing and shipping does. But here is this savior, sort of this lone hero myth that I'll just scroll down and see if there's anything interesting, and then I will close off. So here you have this sort of lone hero who is stepping up to save the day. But what this article brings up is not just sort of how this is emblematic of the issues that we have at the federal level when it comes to funding, when it comes to taxation, when it comes to sort of elevating these sort of white males to these sort of savior positions, whether you're a Trump supporter or, a technophile who would just love Bezos to solve the world's problems. He is going to be dictating, or at least approving, which projects get funded. And so you have somebody who really is functioning outside of rules and regulations, even that's something the president would be adhered to through Congress, through the Supreme Court, to be able to dictate how we approach climate issues. And it's just a really interesting article of thinking about how this will affect how people really take into account or come up with ideas to combat climate, because if it affects Amazon's success and balance sheet, they might not get approved. So, there's just so much inherent conflict of interest and so much inherent power that Jeff Bezos has. And I'm just, trying to think how we move forward without these huge billionaire innovators. But it really is the problem as well. So that's why I found the article really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating, and I think it's a really important question for our time, as we talk about, as we live in a country that's very divided about the role of government and how much government should be doing and not be doing. And, on one hand, it's strange. Like, you hear that news, he's created this fund to combat climate change, and you're
like,
my
yay!
immediate, yeah, exactly, is like, woohoo! Sorry, my computer's propped up on things and it's shaking. But it's reminding me of a couple of other foundations that give money for medical things, for example, which of course right now is a huge boon to what's happening in the world. But this larger question of, if we're relying on individuals to do this, then the individuals get to decide what's important to them. And that can be problematic.
I was listening to an interview of Yuval Harari, the Israeli historian and futurist, with TED's Chris Anderson. And Yuval was talking about how the hero of stories used to be the worker. The workers were the ones, especially post-World War II, they were the rebuilders. And now the heroes are these lone billionaire geniuses who speak in phrases that the average person doesn't understand. They're sequestered away in their, the Aspen Institutes and the Sun Valley retreats, and and their TED conferences, and they're speaking of a future of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, and all these issues that a regular person has very little exposure to, let alone understanding. And so, you can understand how someone like this current president mobilized so much support because he made people feel heard and seen. So, if you have these billionaire geniuses leading the change for climate, but the average person feels disenfranchised and irrelevant because of them, how are they going to coalesce and collaborate with this general spirit of change?
What motivation does anybody have in that regard? Because, there's no modeling done for us by that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, that's always one of those things that drives me nuts in the motivational world, is they're like, you have as many hours in the day as Beyonce. And I'm like, no, I don't. Yeah, that bitch doesn't have to go to the grocery store, but I do. Like, don't give me this nonsense. You know what I mean? Don't tell me that, like, I can live as austere a life as, when you take a vow of celibacy and you're Jeff Bezos in your, perfectly white place with, this only one couch and one plant. Well, that's minimalism by choice. That's not minimalism via poverty. You know what I mean? Like,
that's Jack from Twitter, I think, is the austerity guy.
Yeah.
And Jack just donated $1 billion of his Square shares to combat the virus, as well as then ultimately female education. He's going to be transferring that funds to female.
And that's where, we talked before about when, Gia, we were talking about your piece about the difficulties of, modeling climate change, because every little thread that you pull affects something else. It's like there's glacier melt, and then you reveal the dark rock underneath, and
the reflection
absorbs heat's different. Like, it's so complicated. And in a way, it's reminding me of this conversation right now. This is all gray. I mean, on one hand, we need to do these things, and we need to do them however we can. And right now, I'm incredibly grateful to all of the people who have the means to donate to these funds, to whether it's for medical research, whether it's for, disaster funds to help people economically right now, especially, gig workers and people who are on the front lines, or people whose work has just stopped because we are being safer at home and we're not congregating. So the arts right now are at a standstill in certain ways and things like that, or at least the arts where we gather in the same places. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. But again, when you're talking about research, when you're talking about these larger initiatives, it can't be just them. And I was watching Cuomo this morning, Governor Cuomo, speak about the relationship between the state and the federal government. And he said, look, he said, I wish we could do this all on our own, but we need the federal government to do this with us. No state can combat COVID-19 on its own and the spread of this virus. So it's very complicated.
Yeah.
And that should be then extrapolated even larger, that no country alone should be able to deal with this or climate change alone. This is a global issue, and we need to be sharing data, resources.
Did you read in the piece, is his fund dedicated to funding stuff from any particular country or geographical area, or it's worldwide?
Well, to my knowledge, it's worldwide.
All right, so I'm guessing the folks who came up with the enzyme that works on plastic are probably very excited to hear about that and may want to get into that.
Oh, before we go, I will say that there are 2 PBS documentaries that are literally spot on point. And I think they are the most 2 recent episodes that are out there. I could be wrong, but one is on Jeff Bezos and his rise to Amazon King, and the other is on plastics. And as my brother-in-law says, it's like, do you want to watch a horror movie? Just put on Frontline. That will scare the crap out of you. But I do think that both of them are really worth watching. So if you have any bandwidth to stomach that at the moment, go forth.
We just decided to, for fun, watch Before the Flood, the Leonardo DiCaprio, Fisher Stevens climate movie. So yeah, we're in a climate mindset too. My husband had no idea that he was going to be in for that, and it was pretty depressed afterwards. He's like, is this all true? And I was like, yeah. It's amazing just how little that truth permeates mainstream culture. It's just, like, oh, you're one of those climate writers, and then climate writers who live in a state of depression are sort of put off to the side. But you see a lot of it on Twitter.
Well, my watching of choice lately has been the warm and fuzzy Grey's Anatomy. For those who don't know, I'm a huge fan of the show. I've been watching it since it was on. My mom and I watch, and then we compare notes. Yeah, I've watched
I know, isn't it funny?
all of it.
She loves it.
I do.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm one episode behind because I, in this time, have actually not had as much time to watch stuff because I have a 9-year-old, and between that and trying to get some work done, and suddenly being a homeschool teacher, yeah. But anyway, I caught up on Grey's Anatomy last night. It was real nice to see old friends, and I will not give away plot lines, but they've wrapped up the season finale for this year, which is a little bit shorter than they originally expected because they weren't able to complete all the episodes, but they did complete most of them. So that's my plug for the week.
That's good.
Yeah, technically that wasn't my plug. I have another plug, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say you plug first then.
Oh no, I'm reading a book right now that I really love called How the Irish Saved Civilization.
That's the book about the Dark Ages, right?
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
about the fall of Rome. Now it sounds very bleak, but it's written so well. I mean, talk about turning a subject that could be very dry into something that's just highly engaging and personalized. It tracks the end of the fall of Rome, which I just find very interesting considering our times right now. To think the Roman Empire was 11 centuries long.
Wow.
And we are such babies compared to the length of that civilization. I completely forget my Western civ. But at the turn when the Goths and whatever, not the Goths.
Visigoths.
I'm like, the Visigoths.
Visigoths.
I had heard the story about how it was the Irish monks who salvaged most of the literature from ancient Rome. And so right now I've just come to the end of the story, the true story of St. Patrick. Who's fascinating. I knew that he originally wasn't Irish, that he was Roman, but I didn't know, and I'd known he'd come as a slave, but I didn't know his story. And it's fascinating. And this writer, Thomas Cahill, is amazing. And I bought this in the A.B. O'Connor bookshop in Kenmare, Ireland. So it's actually from Ireland when I was there, and I was there 5 years ago. And so I'm just reading it now, and it's really fantastic.
Wow.
Nice. Gia, what about you?
So my guilty pleasure is true crime. And I just heard an awesome episode of Criminal, the podcast, which takes a look at crime from a lot of different angles, and this latest episode was science related, which is why I thought I'd talk about it. And it has to do with the repopulation of wolves in Yellowstone and what happened to people who disobeyed those orders and why, and the sort of relationship between the ranchers and the state, and how those crimes should be prosecuted, and all that kind of idea. It's very interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah. I love that old school Nova piece on the wolves in Yellowstone. Did you ever see it?
Oh my gosh, I think 90s. I remember that. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love Nova.
I know. There's I have 2 emails from PBS in my inbox that are like all the documentaries I want to watch. There's one on Cuba, and there's one of that. Like, can't wait. Yeah. Well, thanks, ladies. This was a fun hangout.
Yeah, this was good to see you.
And thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Definitely subscribe, please. Click that little.
And share your thoughts of things that have piqued your interest this week, especially.
Absolutely. And if there's stuff we've talked about that you have additional insight on or opinions about, we would love to know. So hit us up in the comments, and we'll see you next time.